Hello, I'm Crickets. Welcome back to I Have a Story. Um, been talking about how my childhood was quite different than most, and how I experienced things that most people wouldn't. I want to ask, how many kids in your neighborhood, when you were a kid, died? In my neighborhood, sitting here thinking about it, I had roughly, I don't know, give or take about a dozen males, boys in my neighborhood. And out of those, three of them were killed. All different incidences. The kid I grew up with very young, he was the only kid my age, and he lived two doors down from me, the third house down from me, and he was the same age as I was. And as a kid, he ended up hanging himself and committing suicide. Down on the other side of me, I mean, people can look this up and, Lord rest their souls. His name was Ed Ligman. And down on the other side of me was a kid named David Stoner, and he hung himself too. I guess that was his real name, and if anybody's good at finding archives of past news, I'm struggling with it. Something I could really use some help with. But I know what happened. I was there. Again, history, I know. Then another kid in our neighborhood, he was actually the one who lived next door to the woman I ended up marrying and a house I spent a lot of time at. He was murdered. He was buried alive, and I don't remember the full story. If I remember correctly, he was buried just north. They found him just north of Alexis off of Secor over in that area. And he was buried alive. I was at my friend's house next door to where he was when I remember when it came on the news and that he was missing. And I was at their house when it was announced that they found him buried alive. And these are things as a kid that I experienced that nobody should ever have to experience, let alone just as a child. And I can't honestly say these aren't even the only people as a kid that I knew around me that died. I had friends even all the way back in the 90s that were overdosing back then. It was heroin. Heroin and cocaine were the two big drugs back then, and still, for the most part, were when I left Toledo, Ohio, that I was aware of. I was out of the drug scene and put those people out of my life when I started a new family and couldn't have those people in my life, even though I didn't indulge in those drugs. I still tried to help people, but when I had a family, I couldn't help those kind of people anymore and have that in my life. If I find the picture of me, if it's still, I think I have it online in one of my cloud pictures. It's a picture of me when I was, 15 years old with a full beard. The one kid in the picture next to me, he died not long after that picture was taken from a heroin overdose. But part of what I question too with a lot of things, I remember when I was a kid and I'd talk about water, chemicals in the water, and there's more I have to talk about in future videos about chemicals in the water and things that I've witnessed, seen, think, different aspects of my life I've been able to put together. And I want to share with you, but those are separate videos for another day. I already talked about the Lake Erie algae bloom, which I'll link that video in right here, and where I really think what caused the boom of the bloom. It makes sense. But anyways, really have to question. I remember when we were kids, there was protests going around our neighborhood back in the early 90s, late 80s. There was protests going around about the pollution that the Jeep plants, because Toledo's big Jeep country. Willie's Overland Jeep. And there was big controversy about the pollution, that they were just dumping toxic chemicals into the creek and what it did to our water. I can only imagine, what all these chemicals of what we've all been toxified and poisoned with, and what it's done to us. Also, people could get rich. So, I guess there's not much more to add to that, but that's more that happened as a kid. And I guess if I want to throw this one in there, I remember when I was a kid and I was just one block over from my house and heard the screech of tires and looked up just in time to see a guy on a motorcycle. Somebody pulled out of the bar. Another statistic, 3 bars in a half a block radius of my house. Lots of drugs and drunk people and craziness that took place throughout my childhood. Finding drunk people in the bushes, passed out in your front yard in the morning, heading out the door to school. Stories like that, But I remember watching a guy pull out of the bar and crossed over the center line and hit a motorcycle head on, and the guy straight off the motorcycle head first through the windshield of the car. That was the first dead body I've ever seen and witnessed it happen. But unfortunately, I've seen a lot of those incidences and a lot of death in my life. More stories for another day. So please join along. Please like, share, subscribe. Help me get my voice heard and my stories heard, and hopefully to my kids one day.